Morning everyone. It's a bit dull, but I wanted to make this video about bindweed and the struggle that I have had in these raised beds to get rid of it. So we moved here 3 years ago. This bed was relatively bindweed free, whereas this bed was an absolute nightmare. So it was everywhere from about here up the way. So how did I control that, and why have I not got any bindweed now? So I'm just showing you, we've got this planted up. So I've got carrots, I've got parsley, I've got some beetroot, rockets going to seed, but there is no bindweed. And again, no bindweed. So this video is going to talk about it and how you can get rid of it. So I've come away from my raised beds and I'm in my polytunnel, which I do not use for cultivation now. It just gets too hot here in the summer. And this is the culprit. This is bindweed. Now, it spreads really quickly under the ground. And it is basically a vine. And it has thick white roots. And this is only sort of showing up because I treated all this last year, and this is only showing up since April, and you can see already how much there is. So how do you get rid of it? Why is it a problem? How do you get rid of it is controversial. Now, in my raised beds, on the first year that we arrived here, it was covered with thick black plastic by the previous owner, which was great, and I left that to the spring, uncovered it, and dug out every single piece of bindweed, and it took me weeks, and I was really thorough. That summer, some protruded from the soil, and basically I dug out those pieces and just traced them back, and digging it out and refusing to let any of the greenery get sunlight and grow weakens it. Now, you can use weed killers. Here in France, we are still part of Europe, and glyphosate is banned. So how have I get rid of the bindweed in here? Well, the first year, this bed, which was rampant with bindweed, was covered in thick black plastic. We moved in at the end of September, and I just left that in situ until early spring, when I uncovered it and dug up every single piece of bindweed root and bagged it and binned it. Now, that took weeks, and I was really thorough. Even so, by May, there was little bits of bindweed still coming up, and again, I just dug it out, binned it, and got rid of it. Every time I saw a bit of bindweed coming up, I dug it out, and it was backbreaking. So this bed was not in cultivation the first year. I was basically using the other bed, which had hardly any bindweed in it. So there are two products that you can use which are very effective on bindweed. The first is glyphosate, and the second is triclopyr. So I've put a slide at the end of this video. Now, we're in France, which is in Europe, and glyphosate is banned in Europe. So, not a thing you want to use, but this is still licensed in the UK at the moment. Triclopyr, you might find it a bit hard to find, or your other alternative, if you don't want to use any chemicals, is to do the digging up and getting rid of. Really therapeutic, guys, but thoroughly depressing, but it worked for me. So I'm now in my third year, and there is not one bit of bindweed. So what's the best way of eradicating it with chemical weed killer? Well, you need to pick a still day. You put a cane into the soil and wrap the bindweed round it. And if you add a drop or two of dishwasher soap or washing up liquid to your weed killer water mix, that will help the weed killer stick to the leaves. And if you're using glyphosate or tricloper or any other weed killer, what you want to do is make sure the leaves are all wet, leave it to dry, and the chemicals in the weed killer are systemic, which means it goes into the system of the plants, it's absorbed into the plants, and that goes down into the roots and kills it. If you use a non-systemic weed killer, basically all it does is kills off the top growth, which is fine, but the roots are still alive underneath, so you'll need to keep retreating it all summer long and possibly the next year, because this is the absolute sod of all weeds. I have it in here. I'm going to pull off all the green growth and I'm going to treat it with pelargonic acid weed killer, which I can get here, but it's not imperative for me in here because this is just a polytunnel for storage. Because where else are you going to keep your tractor out the rain? And I don't cultivate in here.